Here he goes. Pac-12 football here at pregame.tv. The big battle, Oregon at USC. The Ducks laying 8 now with a total of 70. This game being played at the Coliseum in L.A. And Marco, you know what? We discussed a lot of what ifs on Sunday night, first preview radio show about the BCS rankings came out again, and we saw the Oregon Ducks get overtaken by both Kansas State and Notre Dame over the last couple of weeks. And VR asked me, what do you make Alabama against these teams? And I said, well, you know what? Against Notre Dame on a neutral field, I make them 13. Against Kansas State, I make them 10. We heard Chris Andrews, the next day, former Lions maker, come out and make it 13. He happened to agree with where my power ratings were. And I said, as far as Oregon is concerned, I only make Bama 4.5 points better on a neutral field than the Oregon Ducks. And most lines makers are saying it should be around 6, even maybe 7, as far as if these two teams were to hook up. But sticking with my numbers, this line of 8, that's a good 3 points higher off my line than what I make Oregon at USC. My power ratings, and maybe I haven't been adjusted enough, still say the Oregon Ducks are 5 points better than USC in LA, but not this full 8 points that we're seeing right now. So what say you?
Well, I look at this game, and it reminds me a lot of last week with Oklahoma and Notre Dame. You know, everybody's talking bad-mouthing USC, like everybody was bad-mouthing Notre Dame last week. Now, granted, USC's not undefeated, but they lost last week, so now this game lost its luster. You can't tell me that Southern Cal had to have one eye down the road to this week. I know you got to take them one game at a time, and if USC wanted to get themselves back in, you know, the picture for possibly getting a big BCS bowl, they had to run the table. But they were looking ahead here, and I think they're going to be laying in wait. In Oregon, they got to start getting, like you said, they got to start being a little PO'd with the BCS system.
Sure.
That they keep beating everybody that they're beating, and they're not getting moving up in the standings.
And Bryan, USC snapped Oregon's 21-game win streak last year. They beat them 38-35. Statistically speaking, it was as close as the final score. I mean, they were really within just a few yards of each other as far as total yards are concerned. Now, we've seen, at least I have, ever since the Syracuse game for USC this season, at times they're struggling in the trenches, but they're getting healthier at the right time. And this all of a sudden becomes their game of the year, talking about the USC Trojans. The way I wanted to throw it to you is that you've got a USC team who's on par with their first team players with Oregon. These two teams are even as far as talent is concerned. I don't think you can make a big case for either team being a lot better than the other as far as their first teamers. I understand that Oregon has more depth as far as their top-notch players, but that line is the great equalizer, at least for me. What say you on this one?
I may be a little bit against you on this one because I've been anti-USC for most of the season. And in fact, I had a best bet here on the show when they played Cal, and I think that's the first time, or maybe the only time, USC's covered all year long. I've really downgraded USC all year long, and you talked about the lack of depth. And you talk about this being their Super Bowl. This is a team expected to play for the national championship coming into the season. After they lost the first one, they came back, they covered after that. Now they've lost 2 times in a row. You know, if you've watched Oregon, this team has pulled back the reins every second half all year long. They're not going to pull back the reins in this one. I mean, if they get up on them in that game we talked about last year, they were a 15-point favorite in that game, and they lose outright at home. So it's a huge revenge game for Oregon. I think they've had this game circled all year long, where USA's just had it maybe circled just for a couple of weeks.
Well, this one happens to be my free pick. We'll get to it here, Oregon and USC. Well, I'll tell you what, guys, I got to trust my power ratings. They've done well for us, especially in the month of October, but for years. And I'm going to have to go with the USC Trojans plus the points in this one for the free pick. And now I went against USC last week. It wasn't the first time this year. I went against USC when they played Stanford. I had Arizona over USC last week. Arizona wins the game outright 39-36. But USC was missing some key parts, and we mentioned that being one of the reasons we went against them when they took on Arizona. Andre Walker, big offensive tackle, one of the key blockers for Matt Barkley, is back. He's supposed to play this week against the Oregon Ducks. They still scored 36 points against Arizona without Andre Walker there, but I think this is going to shore up some of those problems they have in the trenches. They're healthy up front. Marcus Mariota, the real deal for the Oregon Ducks, no doubt about it, like the way this kid plays. And Bryan's absolutely right. If Oregon jumps out to a lead, they are not going to shut things down. But I don't think they're going to jump out to a huge lead. I think USC keeps this close until the bitter end. My free pick, the USC Trojans, +8 over for Oregon. When we come back, it's the big marquee battle of the weekend. It's LSU and Alabama, that and more right here at pregame.tv.